don't think I need to explain what vibe coding is, but anything vibe coding falls under this track. AI agents and workflow automations, you are automating your own workflows, you're building agents on top of emails, connecting Slacks with Google Sheets, etc., so on and so forth, will fall into the AI agents and automations workflow. Finally, evals. Evals is one of our niche tracks. This is specifically if you're trying to get into AI roles. Evals is something which product builders are being tested upon these days, right? So this is definitely a skill that if you as a product builder are moving in the AI vertical, you should definitely conquer. These are four tracks, and we have prizes, cash, credits, and gizmos across all the four tracks. We also have overall winners for the hackathon, so a lot of prizes to be won. Moving forward, quick housekeeping rules. If you haven't joined our Slack, that is where all the ideation, brainstorming, quick doubt solving, etc. is happening. So please make sure you've joined our Slack channel. Make sure you've registered on DevFolio. On DevFolio, we are actually hosting the hackathon. So this is where you form teams, submit projects, and as soon as you register on DevFolio, you'll also get a way to claim Windsurf credits. Right? I hope you've already claimed your Windsurf credits. If not, I would highly recommend to do it right away because we are just about to begin with the session. Make sure you go through the pre-reads and finally keep an eye on the invites and the links. Please make sure, folks, that you are attending all of these sessions live. That is the best way to absorb whatever we have been teaching and the folks that have been sharing their experience on. Right. Super excited to host Ishan today. Ishan is from Windsurf, and he would be diving into the depths of how do you actually vibe code. Yeah. Seen a lot of people have a lot of doubts on how do you vibe code, how do you make sure your token consumption is limited, how do you make sure you don't get a lot of bugs, etc. So Ishan is here to demystify all of this. I will get Ishan on the stage.
Awesome.
Uh,
Welcome, Ishan.
Hi Ishan, welcome to Mosaic.
Hey, sorry, Aditya.
Hi
Am I
Ishan.
live right now?
Yes, you are
Okay,
live.
okay.
Yeah, Ishan, would love to start with a quick intro about yourself, and then we can just get into the session.
Of course, yeah. Hey, everyone, I'm Eashan. I'm an engineer here at Windsurf. I am from the Bay Area. I was actually raised in Atlanta, Georgia, for those of you who are familiar with the United States. I went to Georgia Tech, did my bachelor's and master's there, worked at TikTok, um, also started my own company, and me and my friends, we got into Y Combinator. After that, I pivoted. I wanted to join another startup, so I joined Windsurf, and I've only been here for around 5 or 6 months, but it's felt like many years with how fast this space moves. So it's been very exciting, and I'm excited to be able to show you all more about the product.
Really great to have you, Ishan. And the community is super excited to learn stuff hands on and try out Windsurf. And they have been toying around different ideas with the tool. So, really great to have you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Cool. Ishan, I'll let you share your screen.
of course. Let me make sure that it works. Giving me a little bit of trouble.
No worries.
Yeah, looks like it's frozen startup. Is it? Um, I'm not sure. Maybe let me refresh. Give me one moment.
Sure, folks. While Ishan joins in, how many of you have actually submitted your projects? This is across different tracks, across different problem statements. Have you actually gone ahead and start building? What stage of the buildathon are you in? I think weekends are the best way to leverage. Uh, yeah, Ishan is back, but please feel free to drop in your answers in the chat. We'd love to know what stage of the buildathon you're in so we can help you. And please ask your questions in the Q&A tab. So towards the end of the session, we'll pick the most supported ones and ask Ishan.
Of course.
Awesome.
Um, just want to make sure, I want to confirm you can see my
Yeah.
screen.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
Yes.
awesome.
yes, please, Eashan.
Yeah. And Saurabh and Aditya, I can't see any of the chat or if
No
anybody has any
worries.
questions. So yeah, feel
We'll
free to
we'll
interrupt
float
me
any
if there are any questions.
interesting questions or any interesting inputs that come along. We'll just nudge you and let you know.
Of course, of course. So today, what we're going to talk about is a little bit about Windsurf. We'll give an overview of the product, and we'll have some best tips on how to use Windsurf, and then we'll have a live build session, and that's going to be the bulk of today's workshop, where we're going to talk more about how to actually build in Windsurf. And we'll be walking through the process of starting a project 0 to 1. And we'll try to get, in the hour that we have, we'll try to get a working version of our application. But to build really production level applications, you would need to spend a lot more time. But I'll lay a lot of the foundations for how to get to that point. So, for those who haven't heard of Windsurf, we were the first agentic IDE. And for those who haven't heard of an agentic IDE or an IDE at all, an IDE is a integrated development environment where developers or anybody can really write code and allow us to communicate with our computers to build software and build products, right? And so Windsurf is an IDE that was built on top of VS Code, and it was the first agentic IDE. And our agent is Cascade. And so you see here in this little GIF is that Cascade is not just like a co-pilot. It's not like a typical chatbot. It's an agent where it can actually perform actions, and it can call tools. It can execute tasks very iteratively and very step by step in a way that simple co-pilots or chatbots are not able to do. Right. And so some of the things you can do with Cascade are generate code, right? So it can write whole files, whole functions, whole classes for you. It can even document all your code for you. Cascade can also explain new code bases. So today we're going to be walking through building a product. But if you were to onboard onto a new project, or let's say you are starting at a new role and you have this big, massive code base and you want to understand it, Cascade, one of the biggest use cases and something that I use all the time, I use Cascade all the time for, is to help me understand code bases and understand how things are connected with each other. This agent can also help you refactor code. So you can, if you have existing code that you want to fix or you want to improve or modify, Cascade can help you do so. And then lastly, if you want to translate code into newer languages, modernize it, or you want to migrate it and improve on the systems and how your code is really structured, Cascade is able to do that as well. And so Windsurf, one of the great things about it was founded on a lot of core principles of really serving enterprises, right? And the benefit of having that enterprise first mindset is a lot of those features then trickle down to users, and in a way that is actually useful to users long term, and don't just situate themselves in one part of the SDLC, also known as the software development lifecycle. And so sometimes what we've seen is when products or apps are very focused on only consumers or only enterprises, then it's very hard for others to be able to really adopt it. The thing with having an enterprise first mindset, though, other than a consumer first mindset, is that a lot of those products and tools can, once they get adoption or once enterprises started using them, right, then individuals are also using them as well. And then what happens is then consumers, as they start to, adapt to them and learn how to use them more and more, they start using them more on the free time. This is what happens with things like Word and things like even all of our docs and mail services, right? And even our project management tools. Right now, a lot of people are using Jira and some other project management tools for their own personal projects, right? So Windsurf, again, like one of the point here I'm trying to make is, because it served enterprises, a lot of the features you'll see here are features that were thought very deeply about, right? Like, how do we build this in a way that will serve an enterprise code base? And so Cascade as an agent, one of the core principles is that it needs to understand a code base very well. And so we've built a very, very robust context awareness engine. And this is something that serves a lot of our consumers, our individual users very well, because once their projects start to grow, then you want an agent who actually understands your code base. You don't want someone, or you don't want a co-pilot that you have to constantly remind how certain things work or how certain things are implemented, right? And so one thing you'll notice about Windsurf while you're using it is that it really feels like it understands you and understands your code base very, very well. And that's something that we have maintained since the founding of the product back in November of last year. And so that brings me to where we have come to at this point, right? We launched different features in Windsurf in waves. And since our launch back in November of 2024, we have launched 12 different waves. And each one has only improved, has made substantial improvements on the previous version of the product. And it honestly felt like every wave that we have launched, we have added not only more features, but features that have improved the quality of our agent and the quality of the user experience, while also expanding into a variety of different use cases to allow different types of users to find utility from our agent, right? Some people are much more on like the product focused side of things, right? And so we launched our own browser that allows people to do research with the browser and send that context to Windsurf, right? We also have a lot of developers who use JetBrains. And so in Wave 7, we launched our agent in the JetBrains editor. It was the first agent that actually was in JetBrains, and now some others have followed suit. But that was a huge unlock for us because so many developers love the JetBrains suite of tools. And then we've added a ton of other things, right? MCP support, the ability to have multiple agents working in parallel, having a GitHub review bot. And for those who haven't heard of GitHub, it's a source code management tool that allows you to kind of have a checkpointing mechanism on how you are controlling like the versions of your code base, right? And then we also launched planning mode. This was one of my favorite features in Windsurf, and now it's embedded into the agent where you can actually plan with the agent. And then most recently in Wave 12, which was just a couple weeks ago, we launched DeepWiki, which allows a user to gain a very, very dense and thorough understanding of any function, any file, any part of the code base in the scope and context of the whole repository. Right. So every single launch that we've made and every single iteration of Windsurf has only improved upon the previous one. And we have seen a gradual shift towards much higher product quality, much higher emphasis on, expanding into different use cases, and also allowing people who are not just very hardcore developers to actually find utility in the product. And so this kind of just shows the how fast Windsurf innovates, right? We only launched in November. Some people think like, oh, Windsurf's been around for a long time. Our editor has only been around since mid-November, and we've now been pushing the frontier on a lot of these different features and product spaces. So before we actually dive into the actual building of our product, let's talk about what I mean by these agents, right? So before 2022, the ancient times, it's hard for me to even think about what it was like back then, but it was a lot of manual work, right? Like we were writing code by hand, every single line we were reviewing as well. We were writing every test by hand as well. There wasn't really a thing called vibe coding. There wasn't an AI tool or any generative AI system that would allow a user to prompt their way into a software product, right? Copilots was the first step in that direction, where now we have this like AI powered chatbot such as ChatGPT or some member GitHub Copilot, or even our first product as a coding assistant, which was Codium. And this was embedded in the IDE and had context of your code base, but was just meant to like answer questions, right? Or maybe meant to like give you some guidance or assistance, but it wasn't actually able to perform actions on your behalf. It wasn't able to um, operate iteratively and perform like a human would perform. It was more of like kind of another brain that you could tap into and ask questions about or ask questions to, and then you'd have to be the one to do a lot of those tasks and execute on the recommendations from the AI. And so in 2024 we saw the pioneering of agents, and what these are the ability to for this AI to actually perform these actions, right? So given it human input, it has the ability to call different tools and iterate on every single one of its calls, right? To determine are we closer or further away from our goal. from our definition of done. And that is how the agent operates, where it takes in that input, defines those set of steps, and then determines if we have achieved enough information or if we have accomplished the goal. And so what Windsurf did with its IDE was we actually completely removed this whole Copilot interface. We didn't want to have any chat interface at all. We just wanted to have the agent, right? And it is similar to a chat interface, but the agent is actually taking actions, right? And so we realized that this was the future of the the development environment space, right? And that is why we built the first agentic IDE. And now, when you use Windsurf, and you use other products as well that have a similar experience, but a lot of them were built, after seeing how the success of Windsurf was really manifested by all of the people that really saw that this was the future of the coding assistant and coding agent space. And so again, these agents now, you can think of them as like an intern. Every time you open up a new chat, you're onboarding a new intern and you're working with them on a certain task. And this intern can go and like execute certain things for you. But again, a lot of your job now has to come on the review side. You should review everything the intern's doing to make sure that it's not breaking anything that's sensitive, or it's not pushing code that is could cause any harm to your product. And so our job as developers, as builders, is slightly changing, right? And it's trending more towards the prompting side of things and the reviewing side of things, where we are focused a lot more front loading on planning, and on the actual execution side. That's where the agent can come in and do honestly a better job than any of us really can at this point. And there's some engineers that are very, very excellent, and they still have a lot of that tribal knowledge that outperforms AI at this point. But for the majority of tasks, right, coding is pretty boilerplate at its very core, right? And so AI is extremely good at writing boilerplate code. And so, especially in software engineering contexts, that is where an agent that is powered by an LLM would really succeed. And so, our work and our job now becomes a lot more on the planning side and on the review side. So, I'll pause there for any questions before we actually go into building the product. Anything, Saurabh, that I can answer?
I think for now we are good. We generally take questions towards the end, but
Okay,
it was great that you shared the journey, how you build products at Windsurf. I think very interesting approaches, especially the waves thing that you mentioned. I would personally love to deep dive on something like that towards the end of the session. But for now, I think we can move forward with the build session.
for sure. Yeah. Let me go ahead and share my whole screen here. Okay. Can you all see my Windsurf editor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to build a very simple research agent. Okay, and I actually I was talking a little bit about what an agent is. This is going to be similar, except because of uh, you know the amount of time we have, as well as just to keep this a little bit high level, we will build a much more simple version of what we consider an agent. Right? And so this will be like a deep research agent that would help you research on any topic, and it's different than like an LLM based simple chatbot application. Right? So before we get into that, this is the Windsurf editor. Right? This is a IDE where you can write code. As you can see here, I've set up a very simple folder, and I'll dive into what everything here is, so that you can also follow along. And so we have our space where we can actually write code, and our main editor page right here. We also have our file explorer. Um, on this right side, this is where we see the Cascade agent. And we have two modes in Cascade. We have Cascade Chat and we have Cascade Code. In Cascade Chat, this is where you can do a lot of Q&A with Cascade. It's still an agent, but it won't actually write code in your repository. It will propose code, it will answer your questions, but it has that guardrail that prevents it from actually writing into your code base. So if you want to go through that loop of like just doing Q&A with it, understanding a little bit more about a certain um, task, or about a certain thing that was already implemented, then you can do that Q&A with Cascade here in chat mode. You can also do the same thing in code. I honestly always default to code because Cascade is smart enough to know when to write into the code base and when not to. But if you do want to have that extra guardrail, you can switch to chat. The next thing you'll notice here is this model selector. So Windsurf, some people may be confused by this, but we are a model agnostic company. So that means we are not associated with any, meaning we are not, we're not directly bound to any model company. So our users can leverage any of the state of the art models. You can use any of the GPT-5 variants. You can use any of the Claude or Anthropic models, the Gemini or DeepMind models, as well as other models like XAI's models and some of the more recent open source ones like Kimi K2, as well as Quen 3 Coder. And there's a ton more that you can enable and leverage in Windsurf as well. So um, this is an important thing to call out because a lot of people, when they see Windsurf or they start using it for the first time, they may default to a model that they think is really smart. For example, when O3 was around, or actually when O1 was around before O3 came out, a lot of people thought that O1 is the smartest model, so it has to be amazing in Windsurf. But the thing is that a lot of those models are not built for agentic purposes or agentic use cases. A lot of those models, especially like O1 and even O3, they are very well suited in like a chatbot interface, but not as good in an agentic interface, right? And again, for an agent, what you need to be able to do is you need to be able to take that input and orchestrate a set of steps to get to that output, right? And the thing with a chatbot model or a model that is built for a chatbot is it takes in this input and its goal is literally to just generate a response. And as much guidance as we can give it on tools and how to actually orchestrate it, the data that it's trained on um, doesn't really encourage it, or at least there's not enough data that it's trained on that um, is comprehensive enough regarding like agents or tool calling or taking that multi-step iterative manner, right? And so Claude 3.5 Sonnet was the first model that actually pioneered this experience of like an agent. And so before any of these newer models came along, I would always use Claude 3.5 Sonnet. And even now, the crazy thing is that it's still such a good model in Windsurf and in other agentic coding products. But with Claude Sonnet 4, GPT-5, my recommendation for everybody here is to use one of these models. And I built out a little model selection guide here, a little key for like how to decide. I won't go through this too in depth, but um, the main point here is like ask yourself what kind of task you want to accomplish. Do you want a simple task, a larger task? How much control do you want? And if so, these are the models you should be selecting for something simple. For something larger, you should be going for a more intelligent model. And if you want Cascade to take more autonomy, then ask yourself like what is the complexity? And then here are the models like GPT-5 variants as well as Claude Sonnet 4, 3.7. And for something very, very complex, you can use GPT-5 High. So we have like different reasoning versions of GPT-5. And you can also use the thinking version of Sonnet 4 as well. The, the one thing to keep in mind though is that each of these models have a credit cost associated with them. And so for those who are using Windsurf right now and who will be, keep that in mind that you have a certain amount of credits that are allocated to your account. And every time you send in a prompt, you're subtracting that many credits associated with that model from your total allocated amount of credits, right? So if you don't need to use a very intelligent model or you don't need to use an expensive model like Sonnet 4 is 2x credits, um, but some other models are more expensive than that, like Opus 4.1 is 20 credits, right? So if you have 500 credits and you use one prompt for Opus 4.1, that is already, you only have 480 credits left. So be very, very cautious when you are selecting models to select the right one, but also keep in mind the amount of credits you have left. Okay, so that is the model selector. We'll talk a little bit more
And if
about
you can
what is
also
here.
share the model selection guide later with us, we'd love to float it in the community.
Of course, yeah, yeah, I can definitely do that. Awesome. So what we're gonna do now is we're actually gonna just go ahead and start building. And so here we have this little chat interface. I'm going to be on Cascade Code and I'm going to actually select GPT-5 as my model here because what I'm going to start doing before I actually start building is I'm going to plan. And for everybody here, when you're building products, one of the best or most important things is to think of like how would you actually build this in a production use case? Would you just go tell this intern to build out a product with just like one little prompt. You give it like one sentence, and the intern will just be able to do it. That is not the case, right? Like we never do that with our interns or with junior developers at all. We would always give it a lot of context, either about our organization or about our use case or about the code base that is currently there. And we provide like very prescriptive and detailed instructions on how to accomplish a task. And so similarly, we want to actually plan with our agent, which again, think of it as like an intern or junior developer. We want to plan with it first on how to actually build or accomplish this task that we want to build, right? And so in this case, we want to build this research agent. And so I did a little bit of pre-work, and I actually wrote out this PRD. It's like a PRD, not exactly formatted exactly like one, but it has these different components, right? With a project overview, a summary of like the architecture, right? And by the way, this is in a Markdown file. And so for those who are like curious, I'll actually take a quick step back. To get started in Windsurf, you click open a new window. You can open a new folder here, generate a new project. I would actually just open a folder and, just like create a new folder here and open it like that. And so all I did was I opened up a new folder. I added in this Markdown file, which has some um, just pre-planning that I did on like how to actually build this research agent. And then what I also did is I set up my environment variables. And so before I actually get into the planning, um, I want to specify that you should have this .env, or it could be a .env .local file, but you need to have like at least either .env or .env .local file, and this will store your environment variables. And this is important because for our research agent, we need to be leveraging LLMs. And to leverage an LLM, you need an API key, unless you are self-hosting the model. But I'm assuming not many people will be self-hosting an open source model. So in that case, pull a key from Open Router, and I have this configuration here. I'm actually not going to be using Open Router because I got rate limited very fast last night and earlier today. So I last minute switched to using my Google Cloud, um, a Google Cloud model. Sorry, a model from Google Cloud, which is Gemini 1.5 Flash, and so I'm bringing my Gemini API key here. But for everybody here, if you haven't already made an Open Router um, haven't already gotten an open router key, you can just go ahead and do that. I can show you how to do that really quickly. If you go to openrouter.com, to the home page, I created an account already. You can generate keys and you don't have to get charged for them. And you can see what models are actually free and what are not. So you just like create a key, you can name it whatever you want, research agent, I already did it. Um, and then you just create it, right? But if you want to only use free models here, go to the models section, sort by low to high, and then you can select any of these models. Don't select this one. This is an image generation model, but the other ones you can definitely select. Um, Keep in mind that some of them have different token constraints and context windows, and some of them may not work as well as others because with the free models, there's a lot of like capacity constraints, meaning there's a lot of people trying to hit this endpoint at once. And so that's something to keep in mind that not every one of these will work, but some of these will work a lot better than others. For example, this Gemma model is a very, very small model. It's a 2 billion parameter model. It may not work nearly as well as DeepSeek's, DeepSeek's R1 model. But DeepSeek's R1 model is also not a great agentic model. So keep that in mind when you're like, building out products like this is a lot of times you have to play around with what models work best. And if you're building a product like Windsurf, where you have a model selector, then it's on the user, right? But and something like a research agent where you're not really building like a model selector here, you want to really figure out and do some R&D and research and discovery on what models work best. And so my recommendation would be to try it out. I am just going to default to Gemini 1.5 Flash. It's cheap, it's free, and I don't run into rate limit errors with Gemini. So I'm gonna leave it with 1.5 Flash. The next thing here that I want everybody to also keep in mind is that I have this .windsor folder. And the way to get that is you go to customizations and just create like one workflow rule. And I'll explain what these are in just a moment. But this is how I can get my Windsurf rules. These are like custom instructions. For those who have used ChatGPT, you can add custom instructions on how ChatGPT should respond to you. Similarly, you can have rules that define how Windsurf or Cascade should behave. And you can have workflows that automate certain tasks. Think of like Zapier, or think of like a YAML file. Like these automate agentic tasks. So that is some of the foundations of like what I have here so far. Let's actually take a look at our research agent. So this is like a very high level architecture of what the agent is going to look like. I have three mini agents, a planning agent, a search agent, and a write agent, which will write that research report. Then I have an orchestrator, and I have this model config, which will either select Gemini or OpenRouter. In my case, it will select a Gemini model, and I will be hosting this on a fast API server, which will essentially be my backend, and then my front end will be a Next.js application. And so, for those who haven't heard of this yet, Next.js is a framework built on top of React and JavaScript, and Fast API is another library that you can use. Um, and so I won't go too in depth into how these things work, but this is the stack that I will be using. And so what I've done here, and I'd highly recommend everybody to do something similar. Although I took the time earlier to do this, is you want to actually break up your project into different phases. And this is extremely important because when you're working with these agents, again, think of them as an intern, right? If you were to work with an intern, you wouldn't just prompt it to build anything, right? You want to actually like describe to this intern everything that it needs to do and what are the deliverables and what are the goals of what it needs to accomplish. And so to build this research agent, I broke this up into different phases and these different tasks. And honestly, like what I did was I had this like very high level prompt, and I used a workflow, which was this create PRD workflow. And all I did was I said create PRD, and I drag and dropped this prompt over, which was like it was like a detailed description of what I wanted to build. And then I said, hey, like build or create a PRD based off of this prompt. And so Cascade, what it did, and I'll show you it working right now, is it will use this workflow. And here's what a workflow is, by the way. It's like a step-by-step set of tasks for the agent to actually follow and to guide its orchestration, right? So for Cascade, the downside of agents is that they're unpredictable, right? And so Windsurf, we realized that a lot of software engineering tasks are uh, standard and repeatable, right? A lot of what a software an engineer does day to day, a decent chunk of it can be automated. And so if you're asking the agent to do the same thing over and over again, and also allowing for that same level of variability and unpredictability, then you are also um, you know potentially allowing room for any errors or any bugs that the agent may build, right? So rather than having that variability or undeterminism, it's better to just go ahead and create a workflow that defines those set of steps that the agent must follow. And if you have these set of steps, this is almost like a prompt library where you can just like send this in, and you actually slash mention. So if you want to use a workflow, you use the slash command, and then you can use any of the workflows here in this workflows folder. And to actually create a new workflow, you go to customizations and you go to workflows, and you can create a global workflow or a workspace. Is there a question, Saurabh?
Ishan, one quick question
Or
here.
Aditya? Yeah.
How
Mhm.
on the left side we can see search agent test workflows and then tasks, right? So if you
Mhm.
can just spend a minute on how did you configure that, and for the workflows part, do we need to do something extra so that we can also use the workflows that you're mentioning?
Of course, yeah. So I can share these with you after, unless there's a way I could do that now. But um, the way to get to this workflows folder is you won't have this .windsor folder at first. You need to
Correct.
actually create a workflow, right? So I have like these workflows right here. Let's just do a test workflow. And so what this will do is this will create a .windsor folder and create a subfolder within that called a workflows folder. And you can even add subfolders within this workflows folder if you have like different categories of workflows. For
Got
example, I use GitHub, and so that's why I have this subfolder here. But
got it.
it, exactly, yeah.
Are workflows
It's
prompts? Like, do you give prompts in the workflows?
Yeah, great question. So it is in one way almost like a prompt library where you will give it a certain set of steps in the form of a prompt. And the benefit of this is like rather than prompting it every single time, and think about it like when we're charging based off of prompt credits, right? And so rather than using a prompt credit for every single one of these steps, if you know that the agent needs to perform step A, step B, step C, step D every single time, then why separately prompt it? Why not just put it in a workflow and then send the workflow to the agent, right? So this saves you prompts, and this also removes that unpredictability of like what the agent is going to do.
Got it. That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Also, is the folder structure something that Windsurf creates for you, or you can create by yourself? Like you have the liberty to create by yourself, but can Windsurf also create for you, or you have to do it?
Yeah, so in this case, Windsurf created the .windsurf folder for me. I'm actually going to, in this project, you'll see Windsurf will create the whole application and will create the folder structure for me as well. So I could have like started with a blank folder with nothing, and Windsurf would have still built everything out for me, added all the folders, the subfolders, and all the files as well within each folder.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. All good.
Yeah. Awesome. So what Windsurf did here, or what Cascade did, was it first created this to-do list where, and you'll notice that this is planning mode embedded within the agent. Whenever the agent realizes that it has to accomplish a slightly more complex task, it creates this to-do list for itself. And you can actually follow the to-do list on what task it has accomplished and what task it's currently in progress, and then which ones that it needs to actually get done, right? And so in this case, I invoke this create PRD workflow based off of this prompt. And in this workflow, I tell Cascade to get the initial description of the feature functionality and then ask clarifying questions, right? And this is actually very, very, very important. One thing that helps so much is to interview the agent or actually allow the agent to interview you and ask questions about what you want to accomplish. And so what's happening here is Windsurf is asking me who's our primary audience, what are the restrictions, right, on this like research agent. By the way, GPT-5 is an excellent model for these types of tasks, for these like planning, these research, these tasks where you want like a very intelligent brain. And so it's asking me all these questions. I won't actually answer them here because it looks like it'll take a lot of time. But in general, what you want to do is before planning it out, go through that interview process with the agent and answer its questions so that you all are both on the same page. Again, think of it as a junior developer. How would you want to interact with a junior developer? You want them to be asking you questions and you want to be answering them so that you're both on the same page, right? So that later on when the junior developer builds the whole thing or when they write out X, Y, and Z files, you don't have to tell them to fix Y and Z files, or you don't have to tell them to fix all of the files, right? So it's better to be on page beforehand to front load a lot of this work, and so you reduce the potential bugs or potential issues that this junior developer may build, right? So um, let's let's go ahead. I won't actually create this PRD. I just wanted to show the process of using a workflow and what it would look like to create a PRD. So then once I confirm all these questions, then Cascade would actually generate the PRD. But I already have my PRD here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use another workflow. And so I have another workflow to actually generate tasks. And so the way I like to work with my agents are I like to first create a PRD, right? Get that business logic, the high level understanding of what needs to be accomplished. Then I want the agent to work with me on breaking this down, this PRD down into actually very scoped and modularized tasks on how to go from point A to point Z in this application. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to invoke this planning task workflow, and this is what this workflow looks like. It's a global workflow. So there's a difference between workspace and global. Anything that says workspace here, this will be in your repository. Anything that says global will be in your local root folder. You see this right here? So this is a global workflow. This will be available in every one of your projects that you open Windsurf in. You can honestly have all of your workflows as a global workflow, but the thing is you can't commit them into your repo, which means that if you do use something like GitHub, then this wouldn't be able to be committed into there. Only if you use a workspace workflow or a workspace rule can you do that. And so I have this planning task workflow, which basically takes in a PRD as the input, right? And then I have an output structure here, which generates a markdown file. And this was taken from inspiration from Ryan Carson. So shout out to him. But basically the process here is we receive this PRD, then we analyze the PRD, and then what we do is we generate the task based off of um, the PRD that we'd already created, right? And so then we work with the agent on this planning phase before actually telling the agent to execute all of these different steps of the plan. And so I'm just going to just paste in my PRD after executing this workflow, and I'm going to select GPT-5 High. And one thing I also want to call out is like we may or may not finish this whole product by the end of this workshop. But what I really want to emphasize here is not like the end result, is more so the process of working with these agents and how to get the most out of it. Because a lot of times people will use a product like Windsurf or another adjacent product and they'll be like, oh, why is it not working? Or why does it always error? Or why does it have these issues and not generate what I want? A lot of times it's the way we're working with these tools. And so it's better to have that foundational knowledge of how to actually work with these agents. And the best way to think about it is um, try to anthropomorphize it, right? Make this agent, turn this agent into a human so that you can also conceptualize and better understand how would you interact with this person, right? And what context would you feed them as well. So while this is operating, startup, any questions that I can answer
Um,
or the yeah.
Yeah, a bunch of questions. So someone's asking, what's the what's the extent of the tool? Like, what kind of projects can someone build? Can something be as complex as, like, for example, someone has asked, can someone build an IDE like Windsurf using Windsurf, or what kind
Of
of
course,
projects
yeah.
uh, are ideal for something like Windsurf?
Of course, yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, Windsurf can be used to build any software, right? So this IDE, it's what every developer uses. Not this particular IDE, but IDEs in general are what developers use to build software, right? And so Windsurf is just an IDE that has an agent that helps with that, that augments that process. And so Windsurf was built using an IDE, and now after we built Windsurf, we are constantly using Windsurf to build Windsurf, right? And so um, everybody who's building any of these products, right? I'm sure some people are familiar with Lovable and some other tools out there. They're all using like an IDE like this to build this out,
Yeah,
build out whatever product they're working on.
absolutely. And do you have like a hub of resources or tutorials that you host that people can benefit from? Because a lot of them have been toying around Windsurf, since Windsurf is a partner at the Buildathon as well. So they have been building their ideas or projects using Windsurf. So are there any resources that they can look up?
Yeah, of course. There's a couple that I can recommend. Um, University. Windsurf University is a great resource to learn about windsurf. You might even see a couple of my videos in here. But these are a lot of like high level intro videos. Some of them go in depth into some different content. We also have a YouTube channel that has even more content in addition to university. But this is something that we are actively working on and are adding more and more to all the time. Another great resource is this customizing, and it's this Windsurf samples GitHub repo. And
Hmm.
this is a public repo that I would highly recommend everybody checking out. And so right here, what you'll see is a bunch of examples on Windsurf workflows and Windsurf rules. And I'll touch on what rules are in a little bit. But we have a lot of like examples of like what production level workflows look like for engineers. And so this is a customization or Cascade customizations catalog repo, and you can actually view the catalog online here and see like some
Nice.
of the rules and workflows, and then just copy them in, right? So this is a rule for um, React best practices. I might actually use that today. So I would just like copy this and then paste this in my rules folder here.
Nice. Would you be able to share the GitHub link that you showed right
Of
now?
course, of
you
course,
can
yeah,
do it in the speaker chat or directly in the chat, which is there, and I can.
yeah. Did you want me to do that now?
I think maybe together after the session, what we'll do is we'll just combine all the links together and share it with everyone attending.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah. So what I just did was I just copied the rule from this from the site here and pasted it in into a new rule, as you can see, and I created a workspace rule, and now this is in my repository. And so what this means, model decision, is that Cascade will determine whether to use this rule or not. If you set it to be always on, that means Cascade will always reference this rule. If you set it to be a glob pattern, that means for certain files, let's say for like a JavaScript file or for a TypeScript file, right? For React files, a lot of times, at least in this repo, we might have it for just TypeScript files. And so we can enter a glob pattern or even in a certain directory. So like, let's say we had a source directory, we can input, we could specify the pattern like that. And that's how the rule would be applied. So in this case, I'm just going to use model decision. When the model is working on a React file, then apply these best practices. Cool. So it looks like it created our task sheet and it stored it in my task folder. Another recommendation here is like have a folder where you're storing a lot of these specs or documentation. And so I have this task folder here, which has this like very high level overview with these checkboxes of like what tasks need to be accomplished. And I'm going to read this really quickly and I might actually adjust some of these. So I'm going to actually move our Next.js to be fourth, and let's actually tab to complete there, and then we'll have the fast API backend integration later. So the first thing is the model config, then the second thing is the individual agent implementations, then the orchestration layer, then we have our front end, right? Um, and then I'm going to make sure to add like sub bullets, uh, Tailwind, CSS v4. This is just the stack that I'm using. Um, React v19. I guess that's fine. I'm actually gonna let that be up to the model. Statsy and UI is another component I want to use. And then what else? I think that should be good for now. We can say React v19. So awesome. And then at the end we'll have some like integration tests and like documentation and optimizing our product. So we'll see how far we can get to today. But I in this workflow, in this task workflow, um, it asks us to verify this high level task list first, and then we can go ahead and complete it, right? So let me actually change this because these are tasks, right? So let me say Tailwind CSS v4, and then Shad CN UI, and then React v19. There you go. So they're not as tasks. Okay, cool. Now let's go ahead and I'm just going to say go because it's asking for my go response here to create these subtasks. And so whenever Windsurf is operating, if you ever want to do something else, right? Like you want to do your own research or you want to work on a different part of the product or project, you can open up a new agent. And meanwhile, you can see what agent is currently operating and you can go back to it whenever you want to. Um, and so if I wanted to work on something completely different, I could, go here. I could turn on chat mode or stay on code and just chat with Windsurf about anything, right? And so what I'm going to ask Windsurf is, and I'm just thinking out loud here. Um, I'm going to ask Windsurf, uh, how should
Oh,
I use a different model? Oh yeah, sorry. Is there a question? So
no, no, I was just helping you get the question. I was saying, how do you use less tokens while vibe coding?
yeah, great question. So there's actually in Windsurf, you don't have to worry about tokens at all. And for those who haven't heard of tokens, they're same thing as like a almost like a word or a character at sometimes, right? In coding, sometimes a token could be like a curly brace, it could be like a number, it could be one punctuation mark. So the way code is tokenized is different a lot of times than like a text tokenizer. But um to answer your question, you don't have to worry about tokens in Windsurf. Sometimes you'll see like it's processing a certain amount of tokens, but that doesn't actually mean that you're getting charged for those tokens. And so I wouldn't even worry about um, I wouldn't worry about trying to optimize for token efficiency because in products like I think like Claude Code, you do worry about that, and like Codex, I think in some other products you have to worry about tokens, but Windsurf is fully like prompt based. So regardless of like whether you send a prompt that does like one thing or you send a prompt that does like 20 things, you get charged for just that one prompt, right? And it's just like that, those credits right there.
Right.
Yeah, awesome. Any other questions, Sarah, while this is um
Folks wanted to
operating right here?
know a little bit on the environment variable file that you've made. Like, what is the structure of
Hmm.
it? How do we build it? Why is it required? If you can just answer.
Yeah, good question. So, um, yeah, I was going to dive a little bit deeper into this later, but the reason I have this is because I want to connect to different APIs or different services. And to leverage a model, right? And in this case, we're building a product that leverages LLMs. And to call an LLM like GPT, right? A GPT-4 or GPT-5 or a Gemini model, you have to use an API key because these are models hosted by other providers. And so you need to pull them via an API. And so in this environment variable file, you can define these API keys. And so what I have here is I have like a sample, a super base, a non key as well as a service key here. I would just set mine up similarly because at some point um, we will be building out our database. It'll be pretty simple, but we'll be using Supabase. And so to connect Supabase to your application, you'll need to import your project URL as well as the anon key. And to connect to an LLM, you'll either need to use a Gemini API or honestly like any LLM API by just going to that model provider and going to their API documentation. Or you can use OpenRouter. If you want to keep it simple, you just go to openrouter.ai and you can just pull in an API key for free. Just keep in mind that OpenRouter, you will be limited to like certain amount of tokens um, in your whenever you're actually calling this model. So I am actually using my Gemini API key because I don't have a limit on this one. So this is why we set an environment variable file and we can leverage it in the rest of our application.
Makes sense. If you can, I think you already mentioned, but if you can just throw some light on which of these folders are gonna be pushed to a GitHub repo if we decide to, and which are the ones which are not gonna be pushed into.
Yeah. So all of these will actually be pushed to your GitHub repo. The only thing that won't will be this end file. Oops, I just exposed my this end file will be the one that it will not be pushed to your GitHub repo, or at least it shouldn't. And if you're worried about it, you can name it env.local. The other tip here is to create a git ignore file, and this will allow you to specify certain files that shouldn't be committed to Git. And so I'm going to specify my end file. If I wanted to specify my prompt.md file, I could say that here. And so whenever we're committing to Git, these would not be committed. But other than that, anything here in this workspace will be committed.
God.
Yeah. And one other thing to keep in mind is Cascade will have access to your Git ignore, or sorry, it won't have access unless you provide it. So there is a setting here, and in my version, I may have it completely disabled, but there is a Git ignore setting that allows Cascade to be able to access, or if you want to disable, oh, right here, Git ignore. So like if you want Cascade to view files in Git ignore, which I always do, I have turned this on. And you'll see here some of the other settings, right? And I can dive into these a little bit later, but um, I would recommend exploring these. And then if you are confused about anything, right, the best resource, in addition to like some of the lectures on Windsurf University, is to just go to Windsurf documentation. And I have it open right here. But this has a lot of really good insight and resources on how to get started with Windsurf and what are the different features, what are the models, what are their credit costs, what is Windsurf tab, right? I won't touch on that today, but this is honestly one of my favorite features in Windsurf where it feels like the model is really predicting what code you want to write. But when you're working with agents, it's a little bit different, right, than working with Windsurf tab. And there's a ton of more things here that are in our Windsurf docs that I won't be able to cover today. That if you look into, you'll be like, oh, that's pretty cool. Let me actually see what this looks like and use it in the product.
Got it.
Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think we are good. Yeah, we can go on.
Okay. Awesome. So GPT-5, you see, it took a little bit of time, and that's what I love about GPT-5 is that it thinks for a while, especially with tasks that I want it to be thinking very deeply for. So we can see its thought process. And one thing I'd highly recommend everybody to do is before you just accept everything it does, read through everything that it thought and read through everything that it did so that you can see whether it was going in the right track. And a lot of times you can stop the agent while it's operating. And if you know that it is, doing something incorrect, or it's thinking on the wrong track, or like, thinks something is incorrect, or thinks something incorrectly and then proceeds down the wrong path altogether, then you can stop it right there and, realign the agent. So I'd highly recommend like following everything it's doing, and this is like a very important thing for synchronous agents like Windsurf.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to read all of the thoughts here. I'm just going to trust that it created a very good task list. And so you can accept either by the snippet, or you can accept by the file, or you can accept like all the changes, right? In this case, I'm just going to accept the whole file. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up a new agent, and I'm actually going to start with history. So this like has now history of everything we've been doing and a lot of our implicit trajectory. And I'm actually going to at mention. And so this is another tool tip in Windsurf is you can at mention certain files. And so I showed that I was able to drag and drop a file here, but you can also at mention it. And at mentioning does the same thing as like almost like drag and dropping, right? So I'm going to at mention this task, this research agent task list that GPT-5 wrote out for me. And I'm also going to select these tasks, and I'm going to hit Command L or press chat. And so what this is going to do is it's going to send it to my agent, and I'm also going to chat with the history. And so what you can do is you can at mention certain conversations that you had in the past. So these are some conversations that I've had in the last few hours. This one that I had 3 minutes ago that we were just working on with the plan. So I'm going to at mention this to give the agent context on what we were doing previously. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, let's go ahead and implement these set of steps. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my model to Sonnet 4. Sonnet 4 is the best model from what I've seen at actually executing like any of these tasks. GPT-5 is very, very good at discovery, very good at research, very good at planning, but the actual execution Sonnet 4 excels at. So I'm going to go ahead and send this, and Sonnet 4 is going to analyze all of this context, right? It's going to analyze our PRD. It's going to analyze these set of steps. And then it's going to, and this is actually a good thing right here. So what we see here is there is an anthropic error. And a lot of people are like, oh, why is Windsurf erroring? When you see something like this means that Anthropic is actually experiencing some downtime. And what's funny about it is their models are so good that their endpoints are getting hit so much that they end up there's a lot of downtime with them. Not, and we have like backups for this. In this case, the backup's not being hit, but I'm just going to revert, and I'm going to send it again. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't work, then you can just switch the model, right? But one thing you notice when you use Sonnet 4 is because it's such a high in demand model that you may see these cascade errors, which is what we're seeing here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this, I'm going to change the model, and let's go to GPT-5 low, and I'm going to go ahead and send this in, and we shouldn't run into the same rate limiting error that we're running into with Anthropic. So one thing that like I wish I could spend a little bit more time on was like debugging and error resolving, especially when it comes to Windsurf. Like a lot of times you'll see little errors like this, and how to like navigate them and go about them is actually very important. And so knowing how to do that is actually going to be very helpful. So I think I'm on an incorrect Wi-Fi. Let me actually switch to a different one. I may drop for a second. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. Am I back?
Yes, you're back. We can hear you.
Okay. Okay. I don't know. Can you still see my
We
screen?
can't see you yet. I think
Just
you
your
know.
video is off, but we can see your screen and hear you.
Okay. Let me refresh this. I apologize. I think my Wi-Fi is
No
experiencing
problem.
some issues.
No worries.
No worries.
Let me just toggle between them.
In the meanwhile, folks, please do upvote questions in the Q&A tab. We have very limited time, so we'll pick the most supported ones towards the end.
Would love to know if people are following through. Are they facing any issues, any questions or any hurdles or bottlenecks that they are coming across? Folks, please feel free to put in the chat, and we can perhaps see if we can help you resolve that.
How many of you have actually tried Windsurf before? Were you able
Ishan,
to?
can you hear me? Aditya?
We can hear you.
We
We
can hear
can't see you yet, but we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know what's happening with the Wi-Fi. Let me reload one more time.
Yeah, no worries. Or in case if you just want to share your screen and go ahead, we can do that as well. Because everything else is perfect.
Hey, sorry, Aditya, can you guys hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah,
we can
that's
hear you
perfect.
and we can see you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I just refreshed. Okay, awesome. Let's go back to our agent here. And so let's see now. I'm gonna enable code mode. Let's go ahead and execute these tasks. And it's unfortunate, I wish I could use Sonnet 4 because it has been the model that excels the best at these types of tasks. But it also could be a network issue on my end. So um,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
let's
it's
hope there's not. Okay, awesome, awesome. Okay, cool. So uh, Cascade is asking us some more questions. Backend structure, it looks like we have, I'm just going to say we have three backend with conflicts agents. Yep. Let's go ahead and proceed. Let's proceed. Because it realizes that a lot of the things we have, um, we already have some of those things. Don't duplicate or repeat things that we have already built in. Go ahead. So Windsurf is going to go ahead and you see here like the level of granularity that this plan is in, right? And this is the type of granularity that we oftentimes set for ourselves when we're working on software projects. And I also would encourage everybody to dive even deeper and create like sub tasks of these subtasks and really push the model to consider like all the different constraints and to um, be as precise as possible. And so when you do things like this, then it prevents some of that ambiguity and that uncertainty of like what the model will do, whether it'll do something that I don't want it to, whether it will do something incorrectly. And so in this case, when you have these tasks and these subtasks very properly and thoroughly laid out, the model has like a very good like ground source of truth of like what it should be referring to, right?
Makes sense.
So what we see is GPT-5. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just asking one quick question. Do you recommend
Mhm.
changing the model, right? Let's say we asked it to start working on the tasks. It would probably, work on some things, and then we might want to interject and ask it to, choose the next set of tasks. So do you recommend switching models in between? Like, let's say we realize, okay, Claude is back again. Should we
Mhm.
experiment that, or should we continue with GPT in this case?
Yeah, in this case, like I would highly recommend being open to switching models. So what happened here was like I normally would have gotten very frustrated. Why is Claude not working? But all it takes is just switching another model, and a lot of times it works, right? And it's important to know what models to switch to. You don't want to switch to like a model that isn't intelligent, especially if you have a complex task. But a lot of times, what I'll do is, as it's orchestrating on a certain task, I will switch the model if I feel like another model will perform better than the current model.
Makes sense. I
Right? So
think
we see like GPT-5. Oh yeah, go ahead.
sorry, please continue.
Mhm. Oh no, no, it's all good. So GPT-5 actually went and created our backend structure. It created our agents folder, which had like our base agent. It had added some tests here as well to test our config. Um, and we have some test cases defined. One thing that's very important is to ensure that the agent is always adding tests for everything it's building. And even if you don't really understand everything that it built, if you could just read the test, and a lot of times the tests are very clear to read, right? Like the what the test means is oftentimes going to be defined in the function definition here. So this is detecting that Gemini is actually set up correctly. This is detecting that open router is set up correctly, or that it's set up at all. And these are just some basic config tests. And would yeah, I would just highly recommend everybody just make sure when you're working with this agent to encourage the agent to write tests out.
Got it.
Cool.
Ishan, you touched
Yeah,
upon orchestration a couple of times. If you can just expand on what do you mean by orchestration so that everyone here is on the same page.
yeah. So orchestration can mean a couple things. In this agent architecture, this research agent, the orchestrator is, think of it as like the group lead or like the manager of this project. This orchestrator agent is telling each sub agent, each planner agent, the writing, like each agent, what it needs to research. And those sub agents then go and research, and then they'll come back and give the information to the orchestrator. And then they'll be like the orchestrator will consolidate that information. And then the writer agent will then go and write the report. Orchestrator means different things, but at a high level, for the majority of use cases, an orchestrator would be the agent that is the more intelligent one that is doing the orchestration or like defining the orchestration of what the agent is going to do or the sub agents are going to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think makes sense. Yes, Ishan. Thank you for that.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So I'm going to say let's not set up our environment. Let me switch to Sonnet 4 again. Let's not create a Venn. Let's just build um, our agents. And I'm going to at mention our backend, and I'm going to say create our planner, um, our search agent, and writer agent as separate Python files and add them in. And I'm going to at mention our agents folder. And then what I'm going to say is make sure to continuously follow our plan right in this task folder and check the boxes. Okay, cool. So let's hope that Sonnet 4 is back alive. If it's not, we'll have to go back to, there we go. Yeah. So Anthropic is probably experiencing uh, a global outage right now because now we're hitting bedrock. So yeah, just keep that in mind that you'll experience some issues with Sonnet, which is unfortunate because it's such an amazing model. But let's stick to GPT-5 low for now. And I'm going to accept all. So you can see all the files that it edited. I'm just going to accept these for the sake of time. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, let's separately create a UI scaffold for this agent. Don't connect it. And I'm actually going to use our voice mode. So one thing that I love to use, and a lot of people who love to vibe code with Windsurf like to use, is our voice recorder, which like saves you a lot of time having to type, right? And I'm a very slow typer, so I'm just going to say, let me allow this. Go ahead and build out our front end in TypeScript with Next.js and Tailwind CSS v4. and create it in a separate folder than our backend folder, and make sure no components are touching it just yet. I just want a UI scaffold for this research agent based off of the plan. And so the model will do some processing on our text to clean it up a little bit, on our audio. So while this is waiting, okay, here we go. And so I'm going to mention our plan file again, and I'm going to set this off. Let me actually try Opus and see if this works. We may just be hitting a rate limiter with Sonnet. I'm assuming it might be Opus too. Okay, Opus is working. But keep in mind, Opus is charging me 20 credits. So would not recommend unless you absolutely need it. Um, Let me go back to our other agent that is building out our agents files. So we see here that it's actually creating our planner agent, it's creating our search agent, and it's creating our writer agent. And so before I connect any of these two, I wanted to build out a Next.js project that did all of these, or that showed us how our project looked like. And while this is operating, and here we see we have to get some input from the terminal. So I'm going to send this over to Cascade by pressing this terminal button. I'm going to click enter. Yes, I want to use ESLint. Yes, I want to use TurboPack. And so Cascade is just going to go ahead and finish out these set of steps, right? So the orchestrator agent would go ahead and define these steps, and now Cascade, like our main agent, is going to go and execute all of these. Their main model right here. So let's go back and check in on our GPT-5 low agent that is currently building out all the agents. So we see here it's searching through our files still. It's still like trying to understand things. It's thinking through its implementations as well, and it's using the OpenAI agent protocol or the agents SDK. And so one thing I want to show before we actually drop off is how we can connect to different services. So right here, we see this MCP store in this customizations tab. So I go to customizations here. We have rules, workflows, memories. Memories, you can tell Cascaded remember anything about you, right? Similar to how you would in ChatGPT. And we've already talked about rules, right? I have this rule for like our project details. I have a rule for like generating a workflow. But another cool thing is this MCP store. And for those who haven't heard of MCP, it's Model Context Protocol, allows you to connect this product or this client to other services via MCP servers. And what we have here is we have the store that you can easily install and connect to any service, right? And so the database that I want to use here is the Supabase database. And so I'm going to go ahead and install the Supabase MCP server. I see that I need an access token. So I'm going to open this up and let me actually generate a new token. Doing this off screen to hide the API key, but um, let's just see research agent generate token, and then now it's just I think you all see when you all use this MCP server. I'm gonna go ahead and I showed my key anyways. Okay, cool. So now we have an MCP connection with Supabase, and so now we can actually chat with our database. And right now we don't have a database set up, but we can have Cascade build our database for us via the Supabase MCP connection. And so we see Cascade actually built out um, our agents, and it's building out our front end. Let's check on the front end and see where it's at so far. Okay, it needs some input from me, so I'm just going to press Y. And in a new agent, I'm going to have Cascade. Let's um, let's build. Let's define a table for our database in Supabase. I don't have a project set up. So first, set up a project. Then in Windsurf demos, and this is my org. And then design the tables. use Supabase MCP. And we already have this MCP connection established. We can see right here, we have Supabase. And so let's see what it does. Cool. And while we were doing all these different things, it actually created our front end for us. Let's go ahead and actually open this up. So I'm going to jump over to our previous agent, and it's actually still working on our front end. And it's still, I think it's creating some utility files right now. Any questions, Saurabh or Aditya, while this is operating? I know we're short on time, but I guess, how long do I have, or did we want to
Uh,
leave time for questions as well? Yeah,
yeah, if you want, if you don't have a hard stop and can extend probably 10 more minutes, we'd love to ask some questions. There are tons of questions in the Q&A tab.
of
So
course.
we'll probably take some time for that. But do you have a hard stop or?
No, I'm good to go for as long as necessary. And while we're answering these questions, I can show, I can kind of work in the background as well.
Amazing, amazing, perfect. Sounds good. Saurabh, maybe we can pick up some questions. Uh, but Ishan, just in general, so a lot of folks participating in the buildathon are product builders. So by product builders, I mean they are product managers or designers or people who are not necessarily developers, right? What are the kind of skills they can hone, or what are the things they should upskill at to be better at this, right? Because they don't necessarily know how to code, but like we saw, you probably don't need to know how to code. You can
Mhm.
write a very detailed spec, or you need, uh, in case if you are very articulate, it can get the job done, right? So what are the kind of skills that one needs to hone to be good at this?
For sure. Yeah, this is a great question. So my recommendation is to build the best skill set to actually be able to use a tool like this and build a production level application is, um, first of all, having good like product taste, knowing like what needs to be built and who you're building it for, right? And if you're not building it for other users, you're building it for yourself, then asking yourself questions on what you want out of this project and what you want
Hmm.
out of this product. And the ability to like self interview and work with an AI on like this back and forth like Q&A is something that is actually a skill that, um, some people think like, oh, I'll just like go and send in this prompt, but getting in the habit of like working with the agent as if it was an intern or as if it was a junior developer is a skill that will be very applicable, not just now, but even in the future when these agents get better and better. If you get in the habit of getting more granular with like defining specs and documentation and working with it as if it wasn't like an expert developer, then you will be better, set in the future when these agents do get better, and you'll be able to like um, handle more complex tasks with the agents. That's one of the skills. Another skill I'd recommend is just like going, and this is less of a skill but more of just a recommendation, just trying out the product and building something and failing and trying it again, then failing again, and constantly failing until like you find a process that works. You find um, a a workflow that works for you, and you're able to build a product successfully that you enjoy, and then at some point you may be able to build something that other people can also enjoy as well. And honestly, like the way I learned to windsurf and the way I honestly learned how to use these agents, and I come from a developer background, and so I was very like, you know, I was very hesitant to use these tools. But the way I started to grow into them was just by trying them out and just uh, figuring out what worked and what didn't work. And a lot of like what I taught today was things that were from my own anecdotal and personal experience, as well as like from research that I've done on like what has worked in the community. So you build a lot of those skills just by failing, and you'll see like how much more you'll learn about how the tool works, about how products work, how building like a production level application works, and what is necessary and required to build something like this by literally just going and building and doing the research with Cascade, um, and building with this agent.
Makes sense. And like you said, being able to write really good specs is going to be super critical, even more so in the next few years. Are there any tips,
Mhm.
words, or advice on how to really write good specs? like maybe a quick 101 would be super helpful.
Of course, let me actually show. I had a slide for this. Um, so when you are defining specs in Cascade or in Windsurf, right? Couple tips here. Um, when you're working with a coding agent like Cascade, uh, one a very important spec that you always need to have is like a change log or some documentation of everything the agent did, including what it did well, what it did not so well, maybe things that you needed to guide it a little bit more on, so that it's not constantly reinventing the wheel. That's a spec that like you can work on with the agent. Another way or another, I think like just a tip on how to get the most out of the agent is literally defining a detailed spec on not only like what you want to accomplish, but what are the constraints, what things need to be working, what are like the P zeros, what are the P ones, right? And then t-shirt size them, right? Like give a certain amount of like developer type of hours to each one of these so that the agent can properly um, sort them based off of what makes the most sense to tackle at a certain time. And in this way, like when you define specs very granularly and you have a very detailed step-by-step process, you see fewer errors later on. And the agent is like tackling steps one by one rather than trying to do steps 1 through 20 all at once. Another thing to also keep in mind is have a very tight verification loop. And so what this means is when you are working with Cascade, one thing I'm not doing too much of right now is like telling Cascade to test itself or like reading through all the code that it's writing. And if you're new to coding in general, what I'd suggest is if it does write code, ask it to explain what it wrote. Ask it to like document everything that it wrote. And if it explained, if whatever explained about like all the code that it wrote was incorrect, then you can tell it like, oh, that's not what I wanted. I wanted this file or I wanted this functionality to be X, but you built Y. And so a lot of like what specs are now is how we're going to like interact with the agent. And it's going to be less of just like a PRD that we just forget about later, but it's more so like a dynamic spec document or a set of spec documents that we will be working with the agent on, and we will like constantly be updating as the agent is operating on that.
This is super helpful. Thanks, Ishan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ishan, you
yeah,
also
of course.
on
Mhm.
debugging a bit. I think we might not be able to go in the depths of that, but would love it if you have like two, three top pointers on what people can follow when they get stuck or when they face issues.
Of course. So in windsurf, like, and with respect to like windsurf bugs, one of the biggest things is literally just like exit the editor and restart it, or like press quit if you're on a Mac, right? Just go to quit and restart it. A lot of times it just works. Or opening up a new chat, a lot of times it just works. I know it's like a little weird, but it's a way like the agent kind of like confuses its context and starts making incorrect tool calls. It's honestly like not so much on Cascade's fault. It's more so the model. Um, so that's one type of error you may face. Another type of error is like network errors, which in that case, what I was experiencing earlier, as well as like rate limiting errors with Sonnet 4. In that case, just like switch models. And honestly, like switching models is a very underrated type of like debugging step, where if like one model is cannot figure out for the life of itself like how to implement something correctly, or even if it's just like erroring in general, just switching the model oftentimes leads to like a one-shot experience of like that whatever you're trying to accomplish. And even if it's a model I don't expect it to one shot, right? Like Gemini 2.5 Pro, I wouldn't expect to be able to handle the same task that I'd give to Sonnet 4 or GPT-5. And sometimes it just one shots tasks because it has context of like all the errors that it was facing and like all the times I tried to retry things. And so yeah, the switching models a lot of times is just a very useful thing to just get in the habit of doing when you're trying to debug Windsurf. If you're
Got
talking
it.
about debugging a product, oh yeah, sorry. Did that answer the question, or was
Yeah,
there
I
more to
think
that
that
as well?
answered. One more quick question over here is when would you recommend starting a new chat, or would you recommend us to just continue in the current one? And when it is losing context, we should probably start a new chat. Uh, Anything on that?
Yeah, great question. So my all the time, and like honestly, I'd say like after a few minutes, you should be starting chats. like you should only be sending like a few prompts per chat. And the reason for that is because, let me actually jump to this slide here. Um, the reason for that is because when Cascade, it hits a certain point in its context window with like just the chat history, then it generates the AI summary. And when you generate an AI summary of anything, what happens, right? Like you lose context, you lose nuances, you lose details that are sometimes very important that for the AI to know to actually perform the next set of steps. And so it's very, very helpful to constantly start new chats, to if and these are just general tips for managing context, to always at mention things, right? Like rather than giving a very vague prompt, to like specify the file, specify the directory, and give like Cascade rules, tell Cascade to remember things. And but the most important one here is like always start new chats. If you're working on one feature, one functionality, and as soon as you're done, don't continue in the same chat. Start a new chat so that you prevent this AI summary from being generated. You don't want to get to this point. You want to stay like where the majority of the context window is left free for Cascade to like leverage in terms of like understanding the code base, rather than being bottlenecked or being completely occupied by this chat history.
Makes sense. But every time we
Yeah.
would start a new chat, we'll still have to give it the context of the other files on that we worked previously on, right? Like, is that
Yeah.
required? Or if you can show us a quick demo here on how we should be doing that.
For sure, yeah. So I showed this earlier, but like one quick tip is to start with history. So when you select a model and you start a new chat here, if you start with history, Cascade now has the context of what you're doing previously, and has like all of its own interactions, but it's not occupying a ton of the chat history. It just has like some of the important details. Another thing you can do is like, let's say a previous chat was very important. Let's say like one chat that you had was like a golden chat that you always wanted to reference. You can at mention that conversation and be like, hey, I want to do something similar to what we did in this conversation here. And that's how you can like, bring in context from different chats to a new chat.
Got it. This was super helpful, Eashan.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to show here is um, you can actually open up your app in the IDE itself, right? And so what I'm doing is I'm opening up our research agent. Right now, I haven't connected the two. But what's cool about this is now I'm not a front end developer, right? I, I feel like I have a good design sense, but I'm not myself someone who likes to write front end code. And so now I can just like select elements here and say like, hey, let's actually use a different font, or let's um, use a thin font here. And Cascade now can just directly map this DOM element to the component and make the change appropriately. And we can also open this up in Windsurf browser. And so I know we're running a little bit out of time here, but Windsurf browser has been something that, and you see here that it made the change. But Windsurf browser has been something that um, kind of was very shocking to a lot of people, like, oh, this IDE, this dev tool company built their own browser. Well, now you see this right here, it's a Chromium fork, but
Yeah,
we can actually bring context from different websites and applications to Windsurf if we want inspiration from them. So another tip while you're using Windsurf is to use Windsurf browser here.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. One more quick thing. Let's say if in the flow of events we just accepted a piece of code and then we realized, oh, everything is breaking for us and it was working pretty fine before that. Is there any way to go back? Uh,
Yeah, another great question. Yeah, so let's say things were working fine earlier, and and then you asked Cascade to do something, and then it did some things, and then it just completely broke a bunch of things, right? What you want to do then is like the main thing to keep in mind is like you always want to use source control. So you always want to be like using a Git repository. You see, like, created this Git repo for me. But you always want to be using some sort of version control when working with these agents. But if you want a little bit more granularity with your checkpointing, you can actually revert back to a certain point in the chat, in this like chat history, if you felt like at some point Cascade started doing the wrong thing. And so like if I have a very long chat, and let me see if I have like an example of that. So I have these very short chats here today, which is honestly recommended. You don't want to have too long chats, but um okay, yeah. If you had like a longer chat, what you could do is you can go to different points. So we have this table of contents here, and you can revert back to that point. So that is just something that like prevents the or that actually discards everything that the agent did uh, after that point from that prompt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks a lot for that.
Awesome. Yeah. The last thing again I'm going to show here is like on Windsurf browser, you can send context of like any website and you can send it directly to Cascade. So let's say I wanted this, I wanted to use a styling of Windsurf's website. So I'm going to go and select this. And what it's going to do is it's going to, let me go ahead and let me find my IDE here. It was not this one. I have so many different tabs open. Okay, it was right here actually. So what it did was when I selected that element, it took a screenshot of it and it selected the context from the web. And so what I've been doing a lot of recently is I've been like going to different websites that I thought were very beautifully implemented. And I would just take that context and send it to Windsurf literally just by selecting the element here. So, and you can also just like send the whole page. And so this captures the whole page and sends it as context to Windsurf. And then it can be like, I want to use the styling that is in windsurf.com. And you can send in URLs to Windsurf, by the way, if you wanted to do research on anything. And you can use at web. But I want to use styling that is in windsurf.com in our apps front end. So yeah, that will be the last thing I'll show here. But any other questions, Saurabh or Aditya, I can answer.
I think something that I'd love to know is how do you build products at Windsurf? Like, what's your product development process look like? I know
Yeah,
you showed the entire waves timeline initially early on in the session, but would love to know how does building products look like at Windsurf and learn from that.
yeah. So Windsurf has been like a very unique experience in terms of the end-to-end product development cycle. I worked at TikTok where it was a very defined and structured process where we would, do a lot of research, do a lot of planning and designing, and then only when things were approved, and it took a lot of time to get things approved, then we'd go into the implementation phase. And even then, there's a lot of like checkpoints there prior to sending it to QA. And then even after that, it took a few days for it to get approved, even for like very small features. At Windsurf, the way products are built is a lot more kind of hacky where uh, it's because it's so fast paced. Our devs are always just trying things out. We're building a feature. If something works, then we like flesh it out a little bit more. We do a little bit of dog fooding with it, and if things look good, then we will deploy it to our insiders version. And then our insiders version is like our internal version of Windsurf, where the whole company will be able to try it out. And as the rest of the companies like dog fooding this product, we're like finding what bugs exist, what things are working, what things are not working, and then we'll determine like whether it's something that is worth launching. And even for the products that are currently existing, we are always monitoring like what's sticky, what things are people enjoying, what things are people finding a lot of issues with. And that is, and we have like this like really tight feedback loop because um we have like a lot of this data on user intent. And I just want to be clear, like we don't have users data, we don't have like the prompts and the code data itself. We just have like their intent. So we see like, did the user like this response? Um did they were they unsatisfied with this one thing, right? We don't actually capture the actual context, but that honestly a lot of times informs what products we need to build or whether we need to improve on a certain feature. um, but TLDR, like the product development process is very uh, startup like, where one engineer will build something and they'll demo it. And if it works really well, we'll start dog fooding it and we'll test it, bug bash it, try to figure out if things are working, if they're not working. And then if they are, and we feel like it's a good feature to launch, we will bundle it into like our big wave package. And then after a couple weeks, we will have all these different features that we want to launch, and we'll launch them all together in this like one big wave.
Amazing. This is fantastic. Another
Yeah.
question. So, we have seen a lot of agentic IDEs in the last 2 years or so, right? What do you think is the next big shift here? Like, where do you think this space is headed? And as someone who has worked at Windsurf for a couple of months, I'm sure you would have a lot of insights that are unique here. But where do you think the product development process, especially with agentic ideas, are headed?
Of course, yeah. So the way I think that this space is headed is in 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 a multiple different forms, I would say, right? Like there's so many different types of software engineering and product development that is out there, right? A lot of what software engineering is today, and it's because I work with a lot of like customers and enterprises, I see that the majority of their use cases are modernization or like maintaining existing code or improving on existing code. And what we notice with a lot of those tasks is that they can be very easily automated. And that is where things like a background agent or like a very autonomous agent will come into play. And so, for those who haven't heard of the company that acquired Windsurf, it was called Cognition. And Cognition is the creator of Devin, which is this cloud agent that runs in the background. And as a user, you can spin up multiple Devins that literally are like AI coworkers. This is different than the Windsurf Cascade. In Cascade, we're working like very hands-on with the agent, but with Devin, you are essentially like telling this coworker what to do, and it's going in like executing all of these tasks and like verifying and testing and doing everything just as an engineer would, like a real engineer. And then it opens a PR, it like opens a change, right? Whereas in Windsurf, we're like very hands-on. And so where I see the space headed is like for the majority of tasks, they can just be automated with a cloud AI agent, a background agent like Devin. And with Windsurf now, this will be a lot of the like the more innovative, the more unique features that require a human to be in the loop, where an AI would not be able to truly grasp like all the conceptual understanding as well as the uh, the small in intuition on like what is necessary to build that product. That is where like a developer that needs to be more in the loop will be leveraged, and they'll be using something more like Windsurf and Cascade. But for again, like a lot of the tasks that we're seeing with software engineering, they can be automated with an agent that is just like fully operating in the background. And so what I see now is I see this like this what I see with the space is like we are going to be able to like hand off tasks ad hoc to like these different autonomous agents, where we have like our human in the loop agent with Windsurf, and then while we're working with Windsurf, we can hand it off to Devin if we have a task that we're very confident a AI coworker can do, and then that AI coworker will be working in the background, and meanwhile we can be working on something in the foreground, and it's just like kind of back and forth where we have like a team of AI agents that we are working with constantly, and um and we feel like just like 10x more powered as an engineer, and therefore we can accomplish like 10x more things. Does that make sense?
Fantastic. Yeah, great.
Yeah,
I think we are right at the brink of time. But maybe just one last question, Ishan. So, like, people participating are also part of a build-a-thon where they are working on their own ideas, their own products. Uh, any tips, words of advice as someone who has been building products for so long? Anything that can help them? We have a 2 week build-a-thon. 1 week is already gone, so probably they have a week and a half now. uh, what do you suggest them to do? Any pitfalls to avoid, things to optimize for? Anything goes. Yeah.
of course. I mean, a lot of this depends on what you're building, but for the majority of products, the thing that I would really focus on is planning very intensely and defining, and we were talking about this earlier, defining specs very thoroughly. Because one thing that um, is actually going to be very important is like when your specs are defined and they're written out, and you have this agent working on it, if something errors, then you want to have something to revert back to, or you want to have some definition somewhere where like you can say, oh, this was just said incorrectly, this is why the agent did something incorrectly. But your specs should be so, you know they should be in such detail where code is a lossy projection of those specs, where the specs are so well defined that you can translate it into Python. They can be translated to Java. They can be translated to JavaScript. They can be translated into something that isn't even code. Like it could be like I don't know, like another type of, it could be like a Jira ticket, right? Like that's how defined your specs should be, where it can be translated into anything. And then when you see, what you'll see with that is that your products will not only be more aligned to like what you wanted them to be, but they will also have just better quality. The agent will actually not skip steps. It will execute everything that is necessary, and um and you will come out with like a product that is more well-rounded, that is more complete, and is less error free. And also another thing to keep in mind is like you should always be testing your product, not just like testing with code, but actually opening up your app, clicking through, trying to break your product. You should be trying to make it fail so that nobody else will ever see any of these like little bugs or little failure cases. Right. So keep that in mind, that like as much as greenfield and new feature development is exciting, uh, we have to also like prevent a lot of the issues that always occur from occurring. Right. And so the best way to do that is have detailed specs and constantly verify, constantly test. And and yeah, and I think you all should be golden. Like I think everybody here seems like they are like very creative minds, and uh, like leverage this creativity, and hopefully like AI can be of some use here.
Absolutely. No, this was fantastic. So glad that you actually went full hands on, showed us the entire process, step by step, answered all the questions patiently. I know we took a lot more time than we had initially promised, but really appreciate you taking the time and joining us. I'm not sure if you got a chance to go through the comments, but people literally had a great time at the session. They all were saying that this was one of the best sessions that they've seen so far in the series, and we have hosted v- very credentialed folks, right? We had people from Gemini, OpenAI, now Windsurf, and we'll have people from 11 Labs and other AI labs as well. So thanks so much for sparing your time, taking all the effort to do this session today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Aditya, and thanks to thank you all for setting up everything, and making this a really smooth and easy process for me.
Absolutely. We have a lot more questions, but what we'll do is probably send screenshots of those questions to you. And in case if you get time, maybe just quick responses would be helpful. We'll reshare with the community. What we'll also do is, I think you showed a bunch of different resources and links and tutorials, etc. We'll try and collate all of that from you and send it to the community. And really excited to see what the community uses to build products on top of Windsurf. They already have access to Windsurf now as part of the buildathon, and we'll send some cool projects your way so that you can take a look and share internally.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that's gonna be really exciting to see.
Awesome, fantastic. Thanks, Ishan. Really appreciate it. We'll hang on for a few minutes to help people with any questions, but really appreciate you joining us. See you.
Yeah, thank you, Aditya. Thank you, Saurabh.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Ishan.
Yeah.
Awesome, folks. That was quite a ride. I hope you really loved it. I was going through your comments. This was amazing, right from the hands-on session to him answering all the questions all throughout, and we could take on a lot more questions. I hope you got a flavor of how it is to actually go ahead and build a product inside an agentic IDE, right? Awesome. Do you have any questions? Happy to take any questions around the buildathon. I know the Q&A tab was filled with so many questions for Ishan, but we are already almost at 2 hour at the 2 hour mark, so we couldn't extend any longer. But
Folks, you can
yeah,
always revisit this session. I am sharing the YouTube link in the chat. So if you want to
this
follow
won't be
through,
live for longer, so make sure that you watch it in a day or so to recap this. But yeah, go through the Windsurf tutorials academy. I think that's the best way to get hands on. and Saurabh has shared the link here. So in case if you want to revisit it in the next day or so, it'll be super helpful. If not, just like Ishan shared in the session, the best way is to actually go ahead and fail couple of times so that you get to see how it all works, right? And yeah, if you don't have access to the Windsurf codes, let us know. It's part of the Notion that's shared with you. So you'll be able to get access to Windsurf and try it out. But highly recommend you use these tools, leverage them to your benefit while building products. They'll not just teach you better ways to build products, but it'll also be a great way for you to actually ship something, right? Otherwise, you all just keep consuming a lot of content but never really build something. So this is a great opportunity to just go ahead, get your hands dirty, and build something nice.
Absolutely, Adi. Folks, as again reiterating, as every other speaker who have given a session here on Mosaic, everyone has pointed to the fact that you have to get your hands dirty and start building things. Please, do start working on your idea if you haven't already. Um Share your issues, share your struggles on our Slack. There is a very active community who is, folks are just helping each other out. And honestly, I am a non-techie, and some of the learnings that I have had has been through failing in these tasks, asking people for help, and figuring these things out. So yeah, if you have any questions, please do join the Slack, post it over there, and we would resolve it for you. In any case, if there are any other things that you would want to call out, send us some feedback. Please feel free to DM us on our Slack channel or on our emails, and we are all yours.
Also forgot to share that if you have taken notes from the session, and since this was a hands-on session, lots of insights all throughout. So please do share your notes on social, tag us, use the right hashtags. You already know it if you're part of Mosaic till now. And we have social winners that we announce every few days. So you'll get access to a lot more prizes, get to win something, but more than anything, just solidify your learnings and share it with your network, right? Um Awesome. I think we have already taken 2 hours for the session, so we'll not extend it any longer. I
Yeah.
really hope you enjoyed this session. If you did, please give a shout out to Ishan on LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., and share your notes. We'll see you in the next one. Till then, happy building and have a great time. Yeah, thank you.
Bye, folks. See you.